We assume that the world will look roughly the same tomorrow, that the big flags will stay big, the superpowers will stay super, and the maps will only change at the edges. But what if that assumption is dead wrong? What if the future's most powerful country doesn't even exist yet? What if the biggest player in 2040 isn't even a country at all? Today we're mapping the world of 2040, not with borders, but with bandwidth. Not with tanks and treaties, but with tokens, trust, and teraflops. We'll break down why GDP and armies no longer define dominance, who the rising players really are, and how climate, code, and culture will redraw the entire global hierarchy. I'm Elle, a computer scientist by training, and I still do some research, but I'm also curious about how culture, systems, and power evolve. I've spent years studying how trust, technology, and governance shape entire societies, and I'm convinced the next global superpower won't look anything like the ones we know today. Let's dive in. For over a century, we've used two blunt tools to measure global power: GDP and military size. But in the 21st century, those numbers are starting to lie a little bit. Let's start with GDP. In 2024, the US had a GDP of 29.2 trillion. World leading, for sure. But how much of that is tied to real influence? Meanwhile, countries like Ireland, with a GDP skewed by tech multinationals, look richer than they are. Shadow economies, digital capital, and AI productivity are distorting the numbers, and military size is equally deceptive. The US spends over $900 billion a year on defense, more than the next 10 countries combined. But in cyber warfare, information ops, and supply chain blackmail, it's Estonia and North Korea punching far above their weight. Power is moving from steel to silicon, from territory to terrain of the mind. If that surprised you, hit like. It helps this video reach more people thinking beyond the old map. So who will actually rise to the top? Some of the most agile players of the future won't be military giants, but digital-first micronations. Singapore, with a population smaller than some YouTube channels, has become a hub for fintech regulations, smart city governance, and global arbitration. Estonia, the first country to offer e-residency. It exports digital bureaucracy like a software product. It's teaching governments how to digitize securely and transparently. The UAE, once oil-rich and isolated, now hosting AI labs, space agencies, and diplomatic summits. It's not just exporting crude, it's exporting credibility. Denmark may surprise you as well. Its government digitized nearly every citizen-facing process from taxes to healthcare. 82% of Danish citizens aged 15 to 89 said they trust public digital services in 2024. That trust is becoming currency. And these aren't traditional powers, but they are becoming something rarer: system exporters. In a chaotic world, nations that can sell stability will win. So maybe we'll no longer have kings, but more constellations. Power might end up being decentralized, scattered across a sky of interconnected nodes rather than centralized in a single throne. The age of singular superpower, the Pax Americana or the Cold War binary, might be over. Instead of one dominant empire, we might be moving towards a world of multinodal influence, where data flows, trade corridors, and cultural hubs shape geopolitics more than borders or brute force. And we cannot ignore the rise of AI here. The field has been evolving for decades through academic labs, corporate R&D, and defense contracts. But for most people, the story began with a conversation: ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude. Suddenly, language itself became a battleground. And as a computer scientist, I am loving this, but make no mistake, we are far, far from AI's culmination. The ground is still shifting and fast, so how does that reshape power? Let's start with a concept that most governments are still struggling to define, which is AI sovereignty. By 2040, the real question won't be who owns land, but who owns language models. Who controls the pipelines of interpretation, prediction, and perception? Countries with sovereign LLMs trained on local data under local laws will have something rare: narrative autonomy. The power to teach machines their own worldview. Think of it as intelligence independence, the ability to think in your own accent at scale. Meanwhile, the geopolitical terrain is reorganizing. Regional blocs like the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, the ASEAN, African Continental Free Trade Area, and Latin America's emerging digital trade union are quietly turning collective relevance into real leverage, pooling data, sharing infrastructure, co-governing tech standards. And then even more radical, cities overtaking countries. Lagos, Jakarta, São Paulo, these aren't just urban centers, they are becoming planetary nodes, With populations larger than entire nations, an economy is driven by digital finance, decentralized energy, and tech entrepreneurship. If national governments can't keep up, these megacities may simply go solo, governing themselves in partnership with other cities, corporations, and even DAOs. The nation-state isn't going extinct, but it is being outpaced, flanked by faster, nimbler actors who can move at the speed of innovation, not legislation. If this kind of systems-level thinking speaks to you, subscribe. We go deeper from here. Okay, let's talk about the quiet killer of empires, demographics. By 2040, Japan's workforce will shrink by 12 million. China is projected to lose over 100 million working-age adults in the coming decades. The EU median age is likely pushing past mid to late 40s by 2040. This isn't just a pension crisis, it's a productivity collapse. This is why in countries like France and Denmark, their retirement age has risen, and I think this is going to come bite us in the other developed countries too. Meanwhile, nations like India, Nigeria, and Egypt are youth-rich, with millions entering the workforce each year. But the catch is that youth alone isn't a superpower. Without education systems, digital infrastructure, and political stability, demographic advantage can turn into chaos. Nigeria's potential, for example, is immense, but so is its fragility. Raw numbers don't guarantee power, capacity does. By the way, this video took several days to make, so if you'd like to support more work like this, there is a link to Ko-fi in the description. Even a small amount keeps this operation going. Next up, onto warfare and defense. This year, we've been talking a lot about nuclear deterrence. Missiles, warhead, the old playbook of power, you know what I'm talking about. But let's set that aside for a moment, because the defining arms race of the next 15 years won't be measured in kilotons, it'll be measured in tokens. I know we touched on AI before, but this isn't about the digital infrastructure or productivity. This is about defense specifically. Because the large language models will be able to generate defense simulations, autonomously triage cyber attacks, guide drone swarms, filter intelligence, and even craft foreign policy briefs. And by 2040, countries will fall into two camps. AI sovereigns, nations that develop and govern their own models, trained on local data, aligned to local values, capable of defending their own digital borders. And AI vassals, nations that rent intelligence from abroad, dependent, exposed, and often misaligned. The digital equivalent of outsourcing your entire defense ministry, basically. Think about the legal warfare on that one too. This is digital colonialism, plain and simple. And there's already a split forming in 2025. Open source powers like France, India, and segments of Latin America are investing in transparent, accountable AI ecosystems, not just for economic growth, but for national security as well. Meanwhile, corporate centralized nations are effectively outsourcing their cognitive sovereignty to Silicon Valley. They're letting private firms dictate their AI policy by default. Ask yourself this. If a country can't write its own algorithms, can it really defend itself? If that made you pause, share this video with someone. Let's get more people asking the right questions before it's too late. Let's move on to the biggest problem that humanity has been facing for a while. The climate crisis. I know that things seem fine today, but we're essentially a frog being cooked without it really knowing. As the climate crisis reshapes the planet, it's also redrawing the global hierarchy. The winners are going to be cold, resource-rich, and underpopulated nations. By 2040, Canada could become the breadbasket of a hotter world. The Arctic is probably going to open up as a major trade corridor, shortening Asia-Europe shipping routes by 40%. No wonder Trump wants Greenland. He's seen what many don't, that climate chaos isn't just a crisis, it's a real estate opportunity. Nordic countries and parts of Russia may gain vast amounts of arable land as well. Meanwhile, nations in the global south face mass climate migration, water shortages, and urban collapse. But we have to recognize that innovation is also shifting. Saudi Arabia is now the world's leading investor in desalination tech. Morocco is exporting solar energy to Europe. Chile is becoming the Saudi Arabia of lithium. The new power isn't about where you are, but what you can adapt to. And now, drumroll please, the big questions. What happens to our beloved United States? By all accounts, the signs are troubling. Political gridlock, rising internal polarization, crumbling infrastructure system. But the US is also unique. No country on earth combines cultural dominance, Hollywood, Instagram, Netflix, elite innovation, Stanford, MIT, Silicon Valley, venture capital muscle, 50% of the world's VC is in the US, and perhaps most importantly, a history of reinvention. In 2040, the US could lead a new digital democratic alliance or fracture into cultural archipelagos with competing visions. The question isn't just will it survive, but in what form? If you're curious about that one, I have another video exploring whether the Nordic model might just be the cure to USA's decline. Check that one out next. So who will rule the world in 2040? Maybe no one. Maybe aliens that will come from that asteroid that's meant to hit the Earth. Maybe Jesus returns. Who knows? But assuming no black swan events, maybe we stop looking for emperors and start tracking ecosystems. Power will be fluid, psychological, and networked. It will live in trust systems, digital legitimacy, and adaptive capacity. The winners won't be those who command fear, but those who inspire credible cooperation. And here is the real shift, that power may become so decentralized, so embedded in code, data, and design that we won't even see it. So let me leave you with this. If power no longer wears a uniform, will we even recognize it when it arrives? And far more importantly, what if this has already happened? I'm Mel. Stay curious, stay skeptical, and remember, history doesn't repeat itself, but it does log back in. Hit like if this remapped your idea of power, subscribe if you want more content that cuts through the noise, and if you want to buy me a coffee that I can slip into the next sprint of making these kinds of videos, there's a Ko-fi link below. Have a wonderful day. Bye!